Okay, so let's get started with Lecture 1. We're talking about welcome orientation in our self-transforming brain. So we're going to just jump right in. First of all, this is the Zoom maquette for our live stream lectures. Just some basic rules that we follow: muting sound unless you'd like to speak, holding questions till after the lecture, which will be recorded. Only the lecture part of the live streams are recorded. We use the chat room for posting reactions and answering quiz questions. And there's always time for students to speak and dialogue, but you're not required to speak, and you're welcome to keep yourself muted and your video muted if you want to, although it's really nice if you can unmute it for the first couple of minutes so that we can say hi. And we do tend to get to know each other, so it provides a really nice social connection time for those of us who can attend the Zoom. And I always appreciate the students who attend the Zoom, because especially now when we're going through more social isolation than usual, it's a really uplifting experience. But I also want you to know that I totally understand that if you cannot make it, there is absolutely no penalty whatsoever, and I respect you equally. And always respectful is our motto in here, both to each other and to ourselves. And I will thoroughly enjoy getting to know you and engaging with you online. So don't worry about it if you can't make it. We did talk a little bit about Resilient, our text, and Rick Hansen, who is a neuroscientist. Here's some information about him on the website. I'll do a brief syllabus tour in another venue because it tends to make the videos too long. So we'll just start with Lecture 1, Your Self-Transforming Brain. And these are the terms and ideas to know that were laid out at the beginning. It's good to have these copy-pasted so that you can take notes on them as you go along so you can remember them. When we write things down, we remember them better. That's something we'll see visually in just a few minutes. So this first chapter is really interesting, and one of the first things that we're looking at is how our brain changes in response to experience. When we do something, our brain changes too. When we learn something, our brain changes too. And we call this neuroplasticity. That's the word for it. And the reason they call it neuroplasticity is because plastic can be shaped into different things. It can be even shaped, this is probably not plastic, it's probably silicone, but it can even be shaped into the shape of a brain, right? So plastic can be molded in lots of different ways. And so that's the reason why they use the word plasticity. It's moldable, it's malleable. And it doesn't really change shape in terms of the structure of it like this, but it does change shape in terms of the neurons. So the neurons are what change the wiring, like the electrical wiring in your computer, right? The wiring is what changes. And we're always rewiring and changing our brain's wiring when we learn something new, or when we have a different way of thinking about something. We can completely change our brain's wiring. So we can change our brain's wiring on purpose. And so that's called self-directed neuroplasticity, when I make a decision to make a change or to learn something new. Now, when we first learn something new, it's not easy because habits are actually neurons, and learning something new requires building a neural path, which is like building a road. As you can see here, when we first do a road, it's all bumpy and it's hard to go on. It's not easy when we first learn something new. We have to concentrate. We have to put a lot of our attention at it. We have to work at it. Think about when you first learned to drive. You really had to focus on everything. But then your brain put almost all of that on autopilot. And one of the ways it put it on autopilot was by getting better and better at building that neural path until that path was a super highway and it could go super fast. Now, this is the truth for anything, whether it's learning how to drive. Let's take a breath. I realized I was going really fast. Whether it's learning how to drive or learning how to not lose our temper, right? So that, or to be more calm. We can teach our brain to be more calm. We can teach our brain to be more patient at managing anger or other kinds of difficult emotions. And at first, it isn't necessarily easy because we're teaching a new pathway. And if we have a well-grooved pathway, if we have a habit of, say, getting on our own case, or feeling judgmental of somebody that we live with, or of the kind of habits that we don't necessarily want to have. It's still well grooved in because it's a habit. And so the neurons actually have to disintegrate to get rid of that habit. This is stuff we've all done. We've all extinguished neural paths and built new neural paths. Many times in your life, you've already done this. When you've learned something new and you've decided to let go of an old way of being. This is the actual neurology of what's happening when you do that, and why it's challenging at first. But if we stick with it, with whatever we want to change, getting better at communication skills, getting better at math, we can build these strong neural paths. It's really exciting. Self-directed neuroplasticity. This image shows you neural highways, like neural circuits, they're called. And you could think of them very much like neural circuits. You've got circuits that go from your computer to your speakers. You've got circuits that go from your computer, cords to a microphone, or to a mouse, or now it's wireless, but there's still circuits that are going on. Your brain is by far the most cross-wired thing there is. And it's wired in many different ways, and these circuits communicate with each other. And neuroscientists are now mapping the circuits, which are like the main highways of the brain. And it's very interesting. It's absolutely fascinating, and we'll be looking at some of that. But self-directed neuroplasticity is that self-directed means I'm directing how I change my brain. So you do this anytime you learn something new, anytime you decide to try to change a behavior and implement a new behavioral pattern, something that you have all done, is self-directed neuroplasticity. That's how the neuroscientists refer to it. So one of the questions that we look at is, what is one way that you would like to change your brain? You can reflect on that, because that is one of the quiz questions. What is one way you would like to self-direct the neuroplasticity of your brain, to put it in neurological terms? Now we're going to look at some other big ideas that we look at later down the course. We look at them again. And this one is by Carol Dweck over at Stanford, the idea of fixed versus growth mindsets. This is a really cool idea and so valuable to know. Fixed mindset is the idea that I either have it or I don't. And usually if I'm not good at it right away, I figure I can't do that. That's a total fixed mindset. Whereas a growth mindset is that I may have to work at it, I may have to put energy into it, but I can get good, I can get better at anything. I put a singer on here because years ago, my son was always a musician, and he had a band in the back garage, and they had a choral group, and they were singing and playing music, and I went and I was humming along and tapping my foot, and my son goes, "Mom, come sing with the choir." And I'm like, no, I can't sing, because I always had this idea that I couldn't sing. But I didn't have a very good voice, was why I had the idea that I couldn't sing. So I had a good reason to think that I couldn't sing. But my son stops the band and he goes, "Whoa, wait a minute, Mom. Everybody can sing. You just have to find your voice." And so he gave me some tips. One of the tips that he gave me was, when you're by yourself and you're singing, listen to yourself and nudge your voice more and more and more in tune. It may not sound in tune at first, but you can sort of train it. You can coax it to be in tune if you just practice it. So I actually did that and a few other things, and now I sing all the time. But the first thing that had to happen was I had to shift from I can't sing to, hey, maybe I could sing, right? Maybe I could get on top of my temper. Maybe I could transform my anxiety. Maybe I could get my degree, right? Really realizing that those things, those possibilities are real for us. So the idea of shifting ourselves when we catch ourselves in a fixed mindset of I can't do that, to a growth mindset. Well, it may not be easy at first, and when we think about it, it may not be easy. We're back to this, right? But it's okay. With some work, I'll get there. Now, speaking of this, when you learn a new term like neuroplasticity, the more you practice it and the more variety of ways you practice it, the faster you build that road. So if you say the word neuroplasticity, you can say plastic, you can say neuro. So neuroplasticity, say it out loud, write it down on a piece of paper. Now you've built that road twice as twice as fast, probably 20 times as fast, as if you just listen to it, because you're using more sensory inputs to help groove those neurons in. And interestingly, as we'll learn under the sleeping, a lot of this grooving happens at night when you're sleeping. That's why sleep's so important. It's like a night crew comes out and really works on that neural pathway that you're trying to build. Fascinating thing that we've learned about sleep research. Okay, so fixed versus growth mindsets. We'll continually work to shift into the growth mindset. Here's Carol Dweck from Stanford. This is huge. She's very famous for this. And there's some details about fixed and growth mindsets that we'll be looking at more and more as we go forward. But some of it is things like the idea that intelligence, when people say, well, I'm not really smart. Well, no, we've learned that intelligence is a growth mindset trait, that we can always get smarter, we can always get more skilled, we can always develop more knowledge, right? So it's something that continually grow, the idea that we can always get better. Another thing to sort of notice about fixed versus growth mindset is there's an assumption that we can have that can put us in a bit of a trap, that if things don't come naturally to me, I'm no good at them. Whereas the idea is that when we have to work out something, if we put some effort into it, that's good, and we'll get better. And we'll always get better, right? We may not be great at it, but we'll always get better. So it's good to connect this. This is another way that we build that neural path with something that we have experienced in the past. So what is something that you have, and you've done it numerous times already in your life? You just didn't realize that's what you're doing. You just didn't know there was a term to put to it. What is something that you have shifted from, I didn't think I could do that, to you were able to do it, and you put a bunch of effort into it, and you were able to master it and do it. So just think and reflect for a moment or two while we take a breath, and I slow myself down, about something that you shifted from a fixed to a growth mindset, like I did singing. And now I do sing. I'll sing around a campfire, whereas before I would shudder at singing around a campfire. All right, so let's just take a moment and take a breath and give you a chance to think of something that you have shifted from a fixed to a growth mindset. Maybe a few things will come to you. So neuroplasticity plus growth mindset means we can get better at everything, including things that we don't necessarily think of in this way, but only because we're not used to it. Not because these are all things that are just like skills of playing guitar, skills of being able to write well, skills at doing math, skills at mechanics, skills at cooking, skills at working with animals, skills at being able to be having a green thumb with nature, and we can develop skills at being and living in a state of gratitude, which is an elevated state of appreciation that puts you in a green brain that actually can become almost a constant state. Being in a good mood, that can be a skill. Intimacy, communication, feeling calm, regulating emotions, self-discipline, social skills. These are all things we can get better at. And these are the topic of the course. The essence of life, boy, the very stuff of it. All right. So what is one thing that you would like to get better at? A way you would like to grow? Let's just take a moment and a breath. And this is, you can always change it as you go along because things will evolve, but this is a really great thing to allow to be a focal point in the class. What is one thing that you want to get better at? We will actually be defining one thing that you'd like to get better at, and outline an action plan to do so and track it during your final project. But it's nice to just start thinking about what are some of the ways, because they're usually on our mind. We have them in our mind. We have these ways that we would like to evolve ourselves. We're not just propelled by the past. We are inspired by the future. Okay, now we're going to look about why it's good to be in a good mood. And this is the beginning of taking a look at neuroscience. We'll be doing neuroscience throughout this. And we're going to start here. Now, this is your brain, right? And it looks a lot like this. And if it would be like this is the back of the brain here. This is the front of the brain here. You can see the spinal cord coming down there. So here would be the eyes, and the nose would be over here. Okay, so here we have the gray matter of the brain. And this thing is fun to touch. It's like, well, you know, it's like those balls that you squeeze for stress and stuff. So, and that kids play with. So usually when we think about our brain, we think about this exterior curly gray mass. It's usually gray, not pink, but close enough. What we don't think about is the middle of the brain here. This middle of the brain, part of our brain, is called the limbic system, and it consists of a whole bunch of structures that are surrounded by a ring-like set of structures. Limbic actually means ring, and this is actually where our emotional brain is, where we feel our primal emotions that dogs and toddlers also express, like mad, sad, happy, attachment, fear, right? They're all stimulated here. And then in the front of our brain, what's referred to as the prefrontal lobes, which is right here, right behind our forehead, that's the prefrontal lobes of the brain. That's the thinking part of our brain. This is where thoughts occur. So primal emotions in the middle, thoughts here, and they're wired, interconnected with each other, but they don't stem from the same source. Okay, so it's really interesting because dogs do not have a very active prefrontal lobe, and toddlers have high potentiality in their prefrontal lobe, but it's not highly wired. They don't even speak a language yet, right? But it's all primed to be wired to speak a language. So, but it's not cross-wired, and the prefrontal lobe includes things like speaking, language, thoughts, thinking inside your own head, but also impulse control, strategizing, reflecting, being able to calm yourself down. It's the prefrontal lobes that help calm down the limbic system. So it needs to be wired in both directions. Interestingly, it's a lot easier to get upset and send the energy up to the prefrontal lobes than for the prefrontal lobes to calm the upset down, which comes from the middle of the brain. So this is our basic first neuroscience lesson about the prefrontal lobes, the executive control center of the brain, where thinking occurs here, right behind the forehead, and where we have impulse control and things like that. And it's actually like a muscle, and it gets tired and it gets worn out. And when it gets worn out, that's when we become more impulsive, because our limbic emotions of desire and things like that have more power. So we'll look at that as we go along, because this interaction is a big deal. Now, when we are stressed out, the prefrontal lobes sort of begin to go offline, and all the energy starts to go into the middle of the brain. So we do not have as much self-control or executive control whenever we're in a bad mood, or when we're angry, or when we're upset, right? These are states that are more dominated by limbic arousal in the middle of the brain, and the prefrontal lobes begin to sort of go offline. Depending on if we're extremely upset, they go offline a great deal, and we're not able to be creative or strategic. We have much less impulse control. We feel this immediate sense of urgency, it has to be done now, that's driven by the limbic system. Now, we'll be talking a lot more about this as we go along. Remember, the author of our text is a neuroscientist, but this gives you a basic idea of how understanding a little bit about your brain helps you begin to understand how our behavior works, right? So this is one of the reasons why it's good to be in a good mood, because we have access, much more access when we're in a good mood, to these prefrontal lobes and the advantages of that executive control center part of our brain. Much more about that to come. Now, there's another, this is one of the last terms we're going to learn this time, and that is the negativity bias of the brain. Basically, what this refers to is that our brain has been pre-set up, pre-wired to overlearn from the negative because it was critical for the survival of our ancestors. That's why you think about the one bad thing that didn't go well that day, and you forget about the 30 good things that did happen well that day, right? So our brain is sort of pre-wired by nature to slough off the good stuff that happens and to overlearn the negative stuff, and then to ruminate on the negative stuff, worried as if it's involved in our survival. So this negativity of the bias of the brain is also cumulative. So if we don't do anything to offset it, then what's going to happen is we're going to wire in. Remember this slide a while back where we looked at neural paths. So if we start thinking too much negativity all the time, year after year after year after year, it continues to tilt that negativity bias of the brain. Very similar to how we tend to slouch, and we need to lift ourselves up. Let's take a breath and open our shoulders so that when we're older, the habit of slouching doesn't mean that we're always walking around like this. So we need to continually offset. Sort of nature's natural tendency over time is to curl in, but we can offset it and continue to hold ourselves stronger and higher. And similarly, we can offset the negativity bias of the brain in exactly the same way through exercises like a process called taking in the good, which is really soaking in positive experiences and letting ourselves marinate them for about 20 or 30 seconds is how long it takes for those neural pathways to build. So when you have that belly laugh with your friend, letting that last a few seconds longer than normal, or you have that delightful time with your child or your pet or a parent, anyone, letting yourself sort of marinate that in a little bit longer builds those positive neural pathways so that we have plenty of those and we're not overrun by our brain automatically over-grooving in that one annoying thing that happened that day, right? This is also associated with the practice of don't sweat the small stuff. So this is related to why it's good to be in a good mood, and we only have a couple slides left for our first lecture, which is, as I mentioned, kind of a preview and about half the size of our normal weekly lectures. We have about 17 slides, and there's usually about 35 slides or so to our weekly lectures. So why it's good to be in a good mood? Because the prefrontal lobe section is most active. This is the creative, sort of contemplative, most open-minded part of our mind. When it's fully functioning, when it's fully online, we can come up with new ideas, we can think of possibilities, we have more self-control, right? We're not as vulnerable to impulses, we're not as likely to drive over to McDonald's and get that ice cream, which was one of my things I used to do all the time. So when we have less, when we're stressed out, there is less of this functioning, and it's more of the middle of the emotional system functioning. So we use tools to help us cultivate relaxing stress, like the breath. Let's take a breath. And inspire feeling good. And then why the Navy SEALs practice breathing. Now you've heard me talk about breath throughout this, and the Navy SEALs breathe with a 4 count, with the box breath that we're going to look at in just a moment, all the time, because it regulates your nervous system. It relaxes your nervous system to breathe deep and slow. And it stimulates the natural relaxation part of your system. It's called the relaxation response, or the parasympathetic system, to do a couple of things. One is to do like a triple inhale or a double or triple inhale breath, which looks like this. That would be double inhale, or triple inhale, where you inhale in little pulses and then a long exhale. And you might even say to yourself inside your mind, ah, or relax, relax, relax. So the double inhale and the longer exhale than inhale stimulates the relaxation response. And that's a really nice way to start a calmer, slower breathing pattern. We also want to drop our breath down into our belly, so allow it to drop down. And a great way to do that is to breathe out first and push your belly button to your back. And then you'll notice that your in-breath naturally drops more down into your belly. So these are ways of actually calming the nervous system of our body, because if our body's agitated, our minds are going to be agitated. It's very difficult for us to calm our body down when our mind is agitated. So I mentioned the Navy SEALs. This is one of the most decorated Navy SEAls in the United States, Mark Devine, and he actually teaches meditation and breath courses. And he talks about how box breathing is inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and hold for 4 seconds. Now this breath is really good for rebooting anxiety. So you breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. And if you're feeling a lot of tension or anxiety, you can push down a little bit while you hold. Not super hard so you blow your eardrums out, but just a little bit pressure down, calming the system. And then exhale like you're breathing out through a straw out of your mouth. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4, and you can do the 4 count however you would do it. We're holding 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4. So you can do the box breath at whatever pacing works for you, but try to do 3, 4, maybe 5 repetitions of it. And this is something you can do at any time in the day, right? Just to sort of calm that system down. And when you're done with a couple of circulations of the box breath, you can just take a couple of nice, slow inhale and outhale breath. Relax, 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 relax. You have a bunch of systems that you're managing, and one of them is your nervous system. You're used to thinking about managing your digestive system, right? You hear a lot about that, how to work with nutrition and what you eat to manage your digestive system. And I bet you even do some things to help manage your digestive system. We don't think as much about that we're really in charge of managing our nervous system, but that's what this is about. And then the last question for this slide is under self-directed neuroplasticity. What good mood traits would you like to practice or cultivate within yourself over the course of this semester? And I want to cultivate the good mood trait of being in more of a resting state of gratitude and calm. All right, everybody. Thank you for that first lecture. Really appreciate it. I'm going to run back to the front and remind you of the terms that we learned. Neuroplasticity. Our brain is malleable. And what really changes is the wiring, more so than the shape. A habit is a neural path. And the more we practice a neural path, whether it's negative thinking or positive thinking or doing math, the better we get at it. Self-directed neuroplasticity means that we can decide on how we want to change ourselves and work. We can the computer can tinker on itself. Fixed and growth mindsets, from I can't do that to I can get better at anything. Some things may take more work, but I can get better at anything. We can get better at everything. Why it's good to be in a good mood. First foundational neuroscience lecture, your limbic system and prefrontal lobes, the brain's negativity bias, survival-based overwiring the negative experiences in. So we really do overlearn the negative, which is great for survival when we're going to be around for 30 years during the hunter-gatherer days, but not great for longevity, because it ends up with an accumulation of negativity, which actually is very stressful on the system. And then how we can use breath and the box breath to relax the nervous system, relax our body, relax, relax, relax. Let's take a closing breath and relax. Release tension in your jaw, release some tension in your shoulders, release some tension in your arms, release the tension in your legs. Let's take a breath in through our heart. I'm grateful that you came today. Thank you all, and I'll see you for week 2 lecture.